On today's episode of the show, 3 reasons why the Louisville Cardinals will cover the spread against Jacksonville State. That and more coming up on today's Locked on Louisville.
You are Locked on Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what is going on, everyone? Welcome into this Wednesday edition of the Locked on Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Want to personally take this time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked on Louisville free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Now, today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Speaking of FanDuel, the Louisville Cardinals are a 28.5-point favorite over Jacksonville State on Saturday. Currently, 3 reasons why Louisville will cover that spread, players to watch for, 3 keys to the game, and much more coming up on this opponent preview for week 2 of the college football season. Louisville plays Jacksonville State, 3:30 kickoff at Cardinal Stadium on Saturday. Louisville coming off of a dominant 62-0 shutout victory over Austin Peay in the season opener at home. They will now turn their attention to another out-of-conference opponent, Jacksonville State, who lost their opening game to Coastal Carolina last week. So Louisville, like last week, not as severe as not as large of a spread, but the Cardinals are favored to win this game, and they're favored to win it pretty handily. So that's why I didn't want to come onto this show and tell you why Louisville was going to win the game, because if you're over a 20-point favorite, you're supposed to win and win by a good margin. The better question is whether or not Louisville is going to cover the spread. Like I said, according to our title sponsor of the show, FanDuel, they are currently, as of Wednesday morning, a 28.5-point favorite. That's a pretty decent margin. That's over 4 touchdowns. You're assuming that Louisville handles business on offense, that they put the amount of points up that they need to, but also take care of matters on the defensive end. There's 3 reasons why I think Louisville covers this spread. And the first one starts out with Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State struggled out of the gate. They hosted Coastal Carolina, and they lost by 28 points to the Chanticleers. And this was a home game. Coastal Carolina opened up 17-3 after the first quarter, had a fumble return for a touchdown, but offensively, Coastal Carolina did whatever they needed to do. And this is with a brand new starting quarterback. Like, Grayson McCall has been the starter in Conway, South Carolina for the past couple of seasons. And then they bring a new quarterback into the mix. I think his name is Ethan Vasco, sophomore. Didn't really play much in the season prior. 2023, he saw some time, 580 yards, 4 touchdowns, but transfer from Kansas. I'm not here to talk about Coastal Carolina. What I am saying is that Coastal Carolina did whatever they wanted to do on offense. They scored over 50 points, and they did so on the road. So the question is, can Louisville beat Jacksonville State basically by the same amount of points that Coastal Carolina did while also being at home? So I think that the short answer is yes. I understand that 3:30 kickoff at Louisville against out-of-conference opponent that's really not all that great. The home field advantage isn't going to be the greatest, but it will 100% be better of an atmosphere and more pressure on Jacksonville State than the Gamecocks faced week 1 when they were playing at home. Now, I know Rich Rodriguez's team has played against some solid competition. They played at South Carolina, and they were competitive last season against the Gamecocks. They have played some solid competition on the road. So they're no stranger to quote-unquote hostile environments. But I just feel like at this point, you look at what happened last week. Jacksonville State lost at home to a Coastal Carolina team with no Grayson McCall now. And they lost by 28 points. Like, this game was almost a blowout from the first quarter. So the first reason as to why they're going to cover the spread is because of Jacksonville State as a whole losing in that week one. And you look at the quarterback play. The quarterback play wasn't really all that inspiring. They had basically two quarterbacks get work. Tyler Shough, the Furman transfer, was 7 of 14 for 173 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. And he had never had over 2,300 passing yards in his career at Furman. You also have Logan Smothers, who was 7 of 13, 61 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. The senior transfer from Nebraska and played the past 2 years at Jacksonville State. He's never had over 700 passing yards in his career in any given season. So at this point, it feels like for a defense looking to put the pieces together, an offense that we're still waiting to see what's going to happen with them, and a team that lost week one the way they did, I feel like Jacksonville State might not necessarily be as good as they were last season. The second reason is that I feel like Louisville's offense is going to put up the points. I mean, last week against Austin Peay, yes, competition considered, they put up 38 first-half points. 28 of those came in the second quarter. Now, one of those touchdowns was early on in that period, but 38 points against the Gamecocks, or against the Governors, sorry. And then they ultimately ended up scoring 62, and it was with their backups in the second half. So will they score 62 again? That's still to be determined. However, one thing that I will say is that if your offense is scoring at ease the way that they did, you really didn't even play 2 of your starting running backs, and your starters played one half of football. That bodes well for what you're going to be able to do moving forward. You're playing against a defense that was pretty good last year, all things considered. But they lost a ton of pieces, and they're having to sort of piece things together now. So their first true road game, you're going up against this is likely the best offense that you're going to go up against all season. It's going to be tough for Jacksonville State to hold Louisville to under 40 points. I think that Tyler Shough was fantastic in his debut last week. He dazzled. More importantly, however, he looked comfortable. And that's the main thing, is they dialed the playbook back because, number one, they could and still succeed at a high level. Number two, you don't want to tip your hand before you get into the meat and potatoes of your season. So the offense is going to score. I think that, regardless of who's running the football, I think that you're going to have a ton of success on the ground. Tyler Shough has another week of football under his belt. You sort of get those preseason jitters out of the way. I'm not necessarily sure if that was a problem for Louisville at any point in this game, but you still get more into the swing of things, which could bode well for Jacksonville State as well. But I think that it's going to be more advantageous for Louisville. And then the last reason why Louisville will cover the spread is their dominant defense. They allowed just over 100 yards of total offense to Austin Peay. I think it was one possession where they were. So with the quarterback play being the way it is right now, and I know this is week one, so trying to take these conclusions away from a small sample size is easier said than done, right? But ultimately, it's an offense that if the quarterbacks really aren't firing on all cylinders, there's a quarterback carousel going on right now. It feels like an early season matchup with the Gamecocks puts Louisville in the best position to get another blowout victory. And, Rich Rodriguez, old friend, Rich Rodriguez, who has been to, the University of Louisville, coaching on the opposite sideline. Jacksonville State has that sort of no huddle offense, that turbo offense, but it's still like a run. It's like a run first up tempo offense. It's really kind of odd, but it wasn't really all that great last year. It was serviceable, but the defense was really the calling card of the team. And for an offense that plays that way in that style, but the quarterback play is just not there. Defensively, I feel like Louisville's going to be really good at defending the run, and it's going to force Jacksonville State to throw the football more than that they would like. And I look at this game as an opportunity for Louisville to continue to pad some stats and ultimately get a victory over 29 points. So you can play the devil's advocate and say, well, Jacksonville State did still put up 27 points. It's another week of playing. They're going to have another week of trying to figure out their quarterback play. I'm not sure if Rich Rodriguez has announced a starting quarterback or not. Truthfully, I know he spoke to the media. I really haven't listened to that to see what he had to say. But I just feel like, all things considered, you look at the last week's game for Jacksonville State, you look at how Louisville's offense can score points in a hurry in their dominant defense. It just feels like all signs are pointing to the Cardinals covering the spread against Jacksonville State on Saturday. 28.5-point favorites for the Cardinals. When we come back, going to continue to preview this upcoming matchup by identifying the 3 Louisville players to watch for in this contest. We'll do so after we tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts. For your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. And welcome back into this second segment of this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Cardinal fans, want to thank you all again for making this show your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. I find it particularly challenging to, give a preview on an opponent that Louisville is supposed to beat by a considerable amount. It's really why we didn't spend much time discussing Austin Peay last week. And it's the same reason why we're spending a little bit more time, but still not a substantial amount of time discussing Jacksonville State. And I say that and watch Louisville struggles with them. No, well, let's hope that's not the case, knock on wood. Louisville's done a really good job of not struggling with FCS and mid-major FBS programs really ever since they've joined the ACC. So let's hope that trend continues. But 3 players that I'm really excited to watch play this Saturday, 3 players to watch for. Number 1, and this is going to go in order. Number 1 is Isaac Brown. The freshman running back led the Cardinals with 123 rushing yards on Saturday. He had a touchdown on that 77-yard breakaway score. Only have 5 carries, but he made the most out of it, averaged basically 25 yards per carry. He's gotten a ton of preseason recognition, even recognition after this week. A lot of the Isaac Brown hype is starting to take off. And one thing that I want to see from him is another good outing, because I think that the opportunities are going to be there. And when I say this, I don't mean this as disrespect to the player that I'm referring to, but I don't want Isaac Brown's situation to end up like Kewan Brown last year, where Kewan Brown's first college game, he looked really, really good against Murray State. In Isaac Brown's first college game, he looked really, really good against Austin Peay. 2 lower-level competitors that the Cardinals demolished, and rightfully so. And then Kewan really didn't get much run after that. And that's really no fault of his. It's just that you had Jawar Jordan and Isaac Arendo ahead of you on the depth chart. I'm hoping that Isaac Brown is able to put together another solid performance that warrants him getting more opportunity when you do play better teams coming up against Georgia Tech in week 4, right after the bye coming up. So that's another thing for me is I want to see Isaac Brown continue to be impressive. I think that he will be. It's just he's such a fun player to watch. Like there's justifiable excitement when you watch him play because what did Tutu Atwell, what did Jawar Jordan, and even Javian Hawkins to an extent, what did they all have in common? Well, you were convinced that whenever they touched the ball on any given circumstance, they could turn it into a house call. And Isaac Brown fits that mold with his explosiveness, his speed, and I want to see him put another really solid performance up. I know that the level of competition isn't the greatest, but I do think that Jacksonville State is better than Austin Peay. So it, by default, will be a tad bit better of, it'll be a tad bit better opportunity at hand for him to come in and play really well. So I think that Isaac Brown is the number one player to watch for the Louisville Cardinals coming up on Saturday against Jacksonville State. Number 2, and technically numbers 2 and number 3 are both on the defensive side. They're incoming transfers before the season. Number 1 is Tramel Logan. And I know that we were sort of waiting for his status. He really hadn't gotten announced by the university up until about a month before the season, but no worries there. He makes his way to the Derby City from South Florida, where last season was probably, I would say, his best season as a pass rusher for the Bulls. He was a 2-year starter, comes to Louisville, and one of the main questions in the preseason was who's going to step up opposite of Ashton Gelati or, sort of being the bat or being the Robin to his Batman. And we're still unknown on the status of Mason Reiger. He's going to miss time. Is he going to miss the whole season? That's still to be determined. But Tramel Logan stepped up, and he ultimately had 2 sacks in the opening game against Austin Peay, 3 solo tackles. All 3 of his tackles were solo. He also had the forced fumble in that game against Austin Peay, where Ramon Purrier scooped and scored, become the first Eastern high school player to score as a member of the University of Louisville. But it was exciting to see him rush the passer. The 6'4", 250-pound edge rusher was fantastic. He was everything you were hoping to be. Where Ashton Gelati spent some time on the interior, which he does at times, you were able to put Tramel Logan out on the other side, and he looked really good. He looked really, really good. And competition considered, I want to see him sort of step up and fill that Mason Reiger role, that secondary pass rusher that you can rely upon to give you consistent pressure. The burst off the edge was notable. I just loved the pursuit that he had to get after the quarterback, and he just made plays, 2 sacks and a forced fumble. Same thing with Isaac Brown, being early in the season. I want to see another performance that, can replicate what you did. Maybe not 2 sacks and a forced fumble, but to the point to where you are at the very least making plays over the field. So number 2 player to watch is edge rusher Tramel Logan. And the other incoming transfer that I felt like was probably the most notable for the Cardinals on Saturday is Tamarion McDonald. McDonald had 3 total tackles in the opening game. He also had 2 sacks, and they came early on. And this is a guy who transferred over from Tennessee, had over 100 tackles in his career with the Volunteers, only came to Louisville having 1 sack to his name, 3 interceptions, a couple of pass deflections. I say a couple, 12 pass deflections. But he doubled his sack numbers right away. He had 2 sacks. I like the way that he was lined up, almost sort of in a Gilbert Frierson type role. I know that, we projected him to be a safety, and I think that he's going to fill that role. But at Tennessee, he played all over the place in the defensive backfield, and I was intrigued by the amount that Ron English and Mark Hagan played him closely to the line of scrimmage and sort of as that slot pass rusher. And he was fantastic in the first half. Only played a decent amount in the first half. I'm not sure how much he played in the second half, but by that point, the starters had gotten benched for the reserves. McDonald was fantastic. He is the probable running partner to MJ Griffin at the safety spot at Louisville. And to see him being factored in as that defensive back pass rusher and also to be able to play a role in the secondary, I thought was key. And I'm interested to see what he can do this upcoming week against Rich Rodriguez's team. So everything, or the three players that you're watching for this weekend are three players that were arguably the best players outside of the quarterback. And I don't want to really make it a force of habit to include the quarterback in the players to watch for, because I feel like that's just kind of a given that's sort of lazy, or at least in my opinion, perceived to be. So unless the situation calls for it, we'll try to keep the quarterback out of the players to watch for. But we will basically conclude Jacksonville State prep coming up on the next segment when we identify the three keys to the game for the Cardinals. We'll do that after we tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Today's title sponsor of the show is FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. If you go to FanDuel.com, you can look at all of the odds for this upcoming weekend's game. There are a couple of profit boosts, not only for the Kansas City-Baltimore game on Thursday, but for games all throughout the weekend. So go to FanDuel.com to take advantage of those profit boosts. And now into the final segment of this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I do want to give you a little bit of a heads up. We will have a Thursday show. Grant Mulligan making his way back on as my weekly co-host. We'll talk about Tyler Shough, and we'll have we'll have a hypothetical game to play where him and I will have a buy-sell segment. But that will be the last weekly episode. Don't forget, we started the week on Sunday after the Austin Peay win, so there won't be a Friday episode, but there will be 5 episodes throughout the week, just Sunday through Thursday. So just a heads up. When we talk keys to the victory, Louisville should win this game. They should win it fairly handedly. But there are 3 things that I think that Louisville can do to ensure that not only do they win this game, but they win it comfortably. And the first one is establishing the lead early. Coastal Carolina did one thing very well, and that was open up the margin of scoring right away. They had a 17-3 first quarter advantage, and Jacksonville State didn't end up outscoring the Chanticleers until the fourth quarter. And at that time, it was far too late. So if Louisville opens up this game and they're firing on all cylinders offensively and they start putting some points up, and you force Jacksonville State to have to throw the ball to get back into the rhythm of this game, and I know that this is an up-tempo offense, it's a turbo offense, if you will, as it's been talked about, I ultimately feel like if you force Jacksonville State into a large deficit, that it's going to get them out of rhythm and force them to play, in a way that they're not comfortable doing. So the first and foremost, most important thing is really just establishing the lead early. At that point, you're also doing what you can to, take away any bit of hope that they have. The longer you allow them to stick around in the game, the better chance they have at upsetting you. So if you establish that lead early, it's beneficial for multiple reasons. Number 2, is getting Jacksonville State out of rhythm. And what I mean by that is this is a team that does like to run the football. It's a run-oriented, no-huddle offense, basically. Getting them into third-long situations, getting them out of rhythm, forcing them to throw the ball, a considerable amount to extend drives. If you're able to get after the quarterback, if you're able to disrupt the Gamecock offensive line, and you're able to sort of bottle up the run game, then you make Jacksonville State sort of one-dimensional. And with their quarterback worries at the moment, seemingly a carousel, and neither of the players stepping up to the plate and succeeding at a high level, making them one-dimensional, it's going to be really challenging for Rich Rodriguez's offense to be able to just go score for score with a Louisville offense that is seemingly going to once again put up a good amount of points. So number 2 is getting Jacksonville State out of rhythm. And I think number 3, this is one that you could probably apply for any game out there, but it's key for a team like Louisville, who last week they forced 2 of them. And when you look at upsets, this is one of the main ingredients. You need to win the turnover battle. I think that can help you cover the spread, is that if you're winning the turnover battle, you're probably going to put yourself in a good position field-wise. You're going to have a really solid field position. Not turning the ball over allows your offense to just be as effective as it was against Austin Peay. And if you can do that and put up a ton of points, like if you score, I think Louisville should score over 40 points. I mean, they scored 38 last week at halftime. And then if you were to keep the starters in, who knows? I'm not sure if Louisville's going to play their starters beyond the first half. It really is just going to be, playing it by ear, depending on what that ultimate, what the ultimate margin is, what the lead is. So if it's a close game, knock on wood, hopefully it's not. They're going to keep the starters in. I think even if it's under 35 points, I feel like Louisville's going to keep the starters in until they get it to 40 points of a margin. So winning the turnover battle is just key from an overall standpoint, because if you do turn the ball over, it can prove costly. You can give some hope to Jacksonville State. Who knows? It could put them in short field position where they don't have to, get multiple first downs to be able to score. And at that point, you put yourself in a little bit of a tough position. So if you win the turnover battle, if you play a clean game from that portion, I know that Jacksonville State last year, they made a lot of mistakes when it comes to, penalties and stuff like that. So if you win the turnover battle, I think you're going to put yourself in a good position. I'm trying to look at the penalty numbers against Jacksonville State against Coastal Carolina. They turned the ball over 3 times against the Chanticleers. They had 7 penalties for 59 yards. So if you win that turnover battle, I don't think that this is really going to be a close game. Establish the lead early, get Jacksonville State out of rhythm, force them to be a one-dimensional team, put them in third and long situations, and force them to have to convert over and over and over again. And like I said, at the end of the day, if you win the turnover battle, you're going to be in a good spot. So that's going to wrap up the preview episode. We will have an episode with Grant Mulligan coming up explaining where Tyler Shough ranks in the ACC quarterback hierarchy. We will have the buy-sell game that him and I like to partake in, and much, much more. That is going to wrap up this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. We'll talk to you real soon. Everyone have a great day, and go Cards.